Hey everyone, I'm Deirdre Breakenridge, CEO of Pure Performance Communications, and we are live at MarketSite in Times Square, and joining me is Peter Himler. He's the CEO of Flatiron Communications, and he's also the president of the New York Publicity Club. Peter, thanks for joining me.
Deirdre, great to see you again.
Well, it's always great to see you. So Peter, we have been in this business for a while,
right?
And we know the value of media.
Yes.
That's your background. So when it comes to media today, we still want to build really good relationships, and we see this shift. Right? So we started talking about influencers. The term influencers has been around now for a few years.
Right.
How do you think brands are handling influencers? Are they moving closer to them because these folks have credibility and trust?
I'm a big believer in earned media. So I still believe that a quality story in TechCrunch drives investment, a quality story, a product on Good Morning America drives sales. So there are things, or in the Wall Street Journal, drives stock price. So I'm a big believer in earned media, but I'm fond of saying that you no longer can rely on the benevolence of a journalist to tell your story. So there are other avenues to build your company's brand and reputation. And so obviously influencer marketing is one, content marketing is another, social media marketing. And so you have to determine what's right for the client, And each one has its, pluses and minuses, but earned media is still a very valuable discipline within the public relations world.
Right, and I agree. It's earned media, and when we talk about the influencers, I think sometimes people often wonder, does it have to be somebody who has a big following or a big network, or do they just move the needle? I'm all about, that third-party credible endorsement and the transparency, and somebody who you're going to build a good relationship with. So that's something that will never change, I think, in public relations.
Right.
How do you think companies and PR professionals can build those relationships?
So there's, again, you have to differentiate between paid relationships. So if you retain an influencer, someone with a large following on Instagram or on Facebook, that's a different kind of building of a relationship. But if you're talking about convincing a journalist of the merits of your company's story, that's a whole other discipline that needs to, that it's an art, actually. So I think the thing that I do is to, first of all, understand what makes your company different and newsworthy, and really understand the story. So look at the competitive landscape, look what's been written about the space, that kind of thing. But then identify the exact right journalist who has been writing about this, and don't spam the journalist, okay?
Right.
Email is still the predominant way to engage journalists, though Twitter is exceedingly important in terms of following these journalists. Every journalist is on Twitter, just so you know.
Yes.
So you could see what he or she is doing and what, and so being on Twitter alongside these journalists is a big plus. But I think if you understand what the journalist is writing about, and this is what we learned at the Publicity Club of New York, these journalists get spammed all the time with superfluous story ideas.
Right.
You'll be fine. You just have to hit them at the right time of day with the right message and the right reporter.
Right, it's always a combination, and there's no excuse. We have so much information at our fingertips that we can find out just about anything about anyone, and that's a balance too.
You have to do your homework, you really do.
Definitely, and that goes back years, so it's not something new that we're telling professionals.
As much as has changed in our business, okay, so there are a lot of different ways in which we, get attention for our clients. But the one thing that hasn't changed is that our clients pay us to build a media footprint for them.
Right.
So whether it's through influencer marketing or whether it's content-driven marketing where you're writing bylines and submitting them to Huffington Post and places like that, or whether you're convincing a journalist of your client's, news value, the goal is the same: to build a positive branded presence and have that branded presence accrue to a business result, product sales, reputation, stock price.
Exactly. There's a lot that goes into it. Now, before you mentioned content marketing, so we now know in public relations that earned media is very important, but suddenly it's opened up to other types of media.
Right.
It's a mix of media. It's the paid, the earned, the shared, and the owned.
Right.
So, being that there is so much, how do you advise a business to take advantage of that? What do you subscribe to in a content model?
So a lot of it is a function of the budgets that are available to
That's a good
do
point. Yes.
paid content. You
Right.
know? So there is native advertising, which is where you create editorial that you pay for to appear in Forbes or wherever. Okay, and it looks like a news story, and it's marked sponsored, but it actually is paid for. Most of my clients, I have some very big clients, and some of them are playing with paid schemes, but most of that, there are ways to earn the client's attention through publicity, through speaking engagements, through byline submissions. So there are a lot of outlets that will take, without having you pay for them, expert opinions, and Huffington Post is 80% of that. Yes. So that's contributed content, and you don't pay for that. In terms of paid schemes, obviously we started talking about influencer marketing, and there are companies now, there's a whole cottage industry that have built databases of influencers at every level. So some influencers, if you want Kim Kardashian to tweet something out on Instagram, it's a couple $100,000 for one, but there are influencers of every stripe and of every price point. So there are a number of firms that do this kind of work, where they match brands with influencers. The other thing I'd mention is that it's not all that different from 20 years ago. I worked for Pepsi many years ago,
right.
and I worked on the Michael Jackson stuff, and they hired him to be their spokesperson to appear in their advertising. Same thing,
Carrying
celebrity.
Forward.
Yeah, exactly.
So with all the content that is out there, and with us pitching and
Yep.
sharing the way that we do,
Yep.
just because we're sharing doesn't necessarily mean that it's getting across,
Right.
that people are excited about it, that they take it and they feel passionate and they want to share it, or driven to action. How do you kind of make it more compelling? What are you thinking about?
So there's some dangers here. Okay, so what I've seen or what I've observed is that a lot of content some years ago, I remember someone saying, well, we have the ingredients to create a video and have it go viral.
Oh, no.
And I never believed that.
I didn't believe it either.
But what I've seen is that a lot of people are really pushing the edge in terms of what I call histrionics. So they do outrageous, they say outrageous things, they behave outrageously. Some shock value, And so you look at this recent example with PewDiePie, where he put out some, anti-Semitic videos. Disney dropped him. YouTube dropped his show. This guy has 57 million followers on YouTube, and all of a sudden he's in trouble because he tried to push the limit too far. So I think it's a double-edged sword, But then you look at a brand like Red Bull. Do you remember that, where they dropped a guy out of a plane, out of a spaceship, and he came down? So that wasn't morally offensive, but it was pretty outrageous, and it got picked up and shared. So I think you have to be audacious in the kinds of things that you do with to create virality,
right.
But you have to also be mindful of the brand for which you're working, because some brands are beholden to investors, to the consumers, to whatever, and you don't want to alienate them.
No, definitely not. And I think it also begs another question. When we talk about, we mentioned the shock value,
Yes.
or even just getting people excited about something, does that actually create the impact? So I'm going to toss a question at you. How do you demonstrate the value, the impact, that it actually helped the business, it moved the needle in some way?
So, everyone's talking about social engagement and that being a valid measure of whether or not your social media campaigns are working. And social engagement comes in a variety of ways. Sharing, liking, starting a conversation, replying. So that's one way to measure it, to see whether or not those that see the social media activity are engaged in some way, and those are measures. But again, in our business, we want to be measured based on our contribution to the business's bottom line, to the company's business. So we want to see product sales. We just did a launch of a food tech client, and she after our media relations efforts, and we had a lot of coverage for them, she said, "Oh, by the way, I did a Google Analytics, and I learned that we went through the roof on how many searches there were on our brand, and it accrued to sign-ups for our subscription service." So
Impact.
that's a measure. So there's no one panacea. There isn't a single panacea for measuring results, but ideally you want it to accrue to reputation, product sales, stock price, subscriptions.
All the things that the C-suite
Right. All
cares
the things
about.
that show your value to the CFO.
Definitely, yeah. You want to make your CFO happy.
Right.
So, Peter, I remember having you in my NYU classroom probably about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I asked you a question then. We were talking about the future of PR and what's next. So I'm going to ask you now, what's next for PR?
So I'm bullish about PR because there are all of these new tools and disciplines available to the PR practitioner if they have the financial wherewithal to take advantage of them. There are some dangers also lurking, and that is the veracity of the content and also the dilution, the dilution of the mainstream media or legitimate news organizations. I mean, it used to be some years ago, the New York Times did a story and that set the media agenda. Today, because of the fragmented media landscape, the fact is that they don't have that kind of clout anymore. They're still important and you want to be in there, but so you have to look at a lot of other things. And so I wrote my year-end piece on 2016, the year PR turned to the dark side. And it was all about creating fake news and about creating, disseminating, syndicating content that was not accurate but advanced someone's point of view. That scares me. And I'm hoping that the mainstream news media, the legitimate legacy news organizations are bolstered and are supported. And you can see the Times, as a result of this administration, are getting more subscribers, and NewsHour on PBS are very, so that's I'm hoping that doesn't come to fruition and that these authoritative, quality content-driven news organizations prevail and assert their authority, So.
Right. Well, I'm hoping that it's always moving forward with the transparency and the credibility, and that's everything that we hold in our relationships, PR and journalists.
I mean, there's one other thing. I mean, I see a lot of agency people, they don't get this yet, but I don't know if you're familiar with the site Producthunt. But Ryan Hoover has this site called Producthunt, and he comes up with he curates all these really cool new products. Well, there are a lot of
the insights on the new
consumer gadgets, et cetera. But there are a lot of very cool productivity products for PR people that really help you do a better job. From this one called Grammarly.
I have Grammarly.
I love Grammarly. It corrects your emails before you send out. Before you regret.
It's on your social media.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's Grammarly, and there's ToutApp, and there's Muckrack, and there are some great tools available to the PR professional today that help you do a better job.
Right. So we always have to keep that as what's
next.
You
have to be curious.
You do.
You have to be curious.
That shows
especially younger PR people.
I agree. Shows leadership too. Yeah. Last question, super easy. Where can people find out more about you and Flatiron Communications?
So, I have obviously a website, flatiron.com, but I also am very active on Twitter, so Peter Himler.
Yes.
And I have Facebook, and I'm in all those social channels, But I think Twitter is really the one channel in which I'm most active under my own name. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Peter.
Deirdre,
such a pleasure.
Always great to see you, especially in this really cool place.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. And stay tuned for more from Nasdaq.